what I want to do, if you don't mind, is I actually want to focus on pesach, and I want to because I mean it's coming up, and it's nice to have a couple of ideas on the Seder. Okay. Well, you'd rather have a Seder than left. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to look at is the following. So the halacha is, we know that we've got to have 4 cups of wine. 4 cups of wine. Okay. Why do we have 4 cups of wine? So that's question 1. We have to try and answer that. But not only that, part of the 4 cups of wine, the halacha is you have to have them al haseder, which means according to the order of the Seder. Okay? So we've got 2. Why is that so important? And why do you have to have 4? I'm going to switch the first. Let's start with the first one. What does it mean al haseder? So we have to look at the Seder. The Seder isn't like this one big thing. The Seder is very, very carefully divided up into different spaces. We know that it says in Tehillim, there's a value to wine. What's the value to wine? To wine. It says, V'yain yisamach levav enosh. There's something about it makes you happy. It's about simcha. There's this concept of simcha. So when we start our Seder, we do this strange thing. Right? We always make Kiddush. Okay? Kiddush is everything. Every Yom Tov starts with Kiddush. But then we say this thing, halach ma'anya. And the halach ma'anya is very difficult to understand because first it's in the wrong place and you're inviting people to your Seder. And it's just weird in a way. Okay. So part of the halach ma'anya, you look at the end of it, it says, Hashtaha, l'shana haba ba'ar Yisrael, Hashta abdi l'shana b'bnei Chol. This year we are here, next year we'll be in Israel. We're going to sing the Shana Rabbi Shalom if you want to. Okay. And then it says, now we are slaves, next year we'll be free. Now what that actually does is that it sets a tone which is actually very miserable. Right? If you want to come and eat, you can. If anyone hungry, well, no one's coming because the doors are locked and everyone's having their own Seder. There's no one bundling the streets looking for a Seder. You know, I'm sure there are, but no one's bundling because they don't. So how does it apply to me? Because I understand that it's really a token thing that I'm saying. I'm calling people to come and join me, but they're not going to come and join me because it's not that space any longer. It's a sad space. So what does yain do? Yain is samach lavavinosh. Part of the wine space is to uplift us out of the state of avdut, out of the state of call it downness, for want of a better word, okay, into a state of freedom in a way. Now, how does that work? So we start to say Kiddush, but Kiddush is the standard, as we said, for every single Yom Tov. There's no difference in the Kiddush this year, and except for the fact that everybody else has to drink. Just by the way, in halacha, very important halacha, and that is that on a Shabbos, on the normal Yom Tov, no one has to drink except for the person who's making Kiddush, and that's very important because everyone goes like nuts about, you've got to pour your little cup, and the kids like it. It's like, but you don't have to. You don't have to. That's what we do. I mean, if you don't do that, you still fulfill your mitzvah Kiddush. How do I know that? Because when you're at the Kiddush at Shul on a Shabbos day, no one passes around little, they're doing other drinks that are passing around, but they're not passing around the drink, right? Okay? So if that's the case, that's clear. You don't need that. Okay, but on Seder night, everyone has to have their cup of wine. Okay, we don't go too much into this, but you all know, don't have a big one because that's silly. And you should try and at least drink raw kos. Okay, Seder Soloveitchik, you can have grape juice, but you should put a little bit of wine in it to give it a little bit of alcoholic content, because the alcoholic content is the thing that gives you that sense of simcha. No one gets simcha from grape juice. Okay, let's be clear, right? You're not going to say tummy might get fat, but you're not going to get simcha. Okay, the wine is the same sugar content, at least you get a little bit of joy with it. Okay, and the fat and all other things that happen, right? But that's the point. You got it? So the first one is the Kiddush. Then when do we pour the second cup of wine? And why? Before that, before halal. So we pour the second before we start the actual magid itself, right? Because the magid is said on a cup of wine. Now, if you think about it carefully, right? We say so many things on a cup of wine that you don't actually need to have a cup of wine for. So Kiddush, you don't need wine. You'll be sanctifying the day. What do you need a liter of wine? Because it gives us hashivas. At a bris milah, you say b'rei agafen. Oh, you have to say b'rei agafen. What's it got to do? Chop you. I mean, what's it got to do with anything? Right? For pidyon aben, some people have a cup of wine. At a wedding, b'rei agafen. Right? The whole point of the wine is that it gives it hashivas. It gives it importance. What we're saying is that this magid that we're about to say has got a fundamental importance to us, and it's not just willy-nilly. Therefore, we pour the second cup of wine. Okay? But we pour it, and we go through this whole telling of the Seder, the Magid, and then we drink it after what? After we say the bracha of Gaal Yisrael. Okay? Why? Because when we see that there's this process that we've been through, we say, Patach Tignut Masai Bashvat. We start with degradation, with slaves, but we end with freedom. And then it's celebratory. Because it's celebratory, we drink that second cup of wine at the end, just before the thing that everybody waits for, and that is your kneipa. Okay? I mean, if you make kneipa, if you're kabbalah, your loss. Okay, so that is the second cup of wine. The third cup of wine is said over what? Benching. Now that's interesting, because all of a sudden, what we've done to benching is we've changed it from benching into part of the Seder. You see that? It's not normal benching. Or maybe it's not the benching that you're using that cup of wine. Maybe that cup of wine actually is reflective of the meal. The meal on Pesach is not a normal meal. I mean, I know you cook and all things, but that's not the important part of the meal, funnily enough, sorry to tell you. The important part of the meal is the meal. The meal itself becomes a celebration of the Chag on a very deep level. The meal of Pesach should not be a meal like any other Yom Tov that you have. I mean, it's hard. I mean, you've got kids and they're running around and you shout, whatever. It's not easy, but we should try and create a certain atmosphere of chayra, of freedom, of joy, of warmth, of love, of learning in the meal itself, not only in the Haggadah. You know, it's not because then your meal transforms itself. Where does the transformation of the meal begin? So let's go through that process quickly. Okay, I'm rushing through. I hope you don't mind, but I want to try and cover this because I want to get back to the real answer, the real question that we have. Okay, so the transformation of the meal, we say kadesh, otat, kalpas, yachatz. So much pressure on all of that. Magid, rachza. Right, we wash our hands again the second time. Motzi matzah. Now, motzi matzah is an astounding statement. It's not motzi matzah, it's motzi matzah. But we put them together as one step. Okay, why? Because you can't eat the matzah without saying, you can't eat the matzah shel mitzvah without saying hamotzi. But how are you supposed to say it? You're supposed to always have two complete loaves when we say hamotzi, right? This year we've got three. One of them is incomplete. So we take all three together, we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, you drop the bottom one, and then the middle one is the real mitzvah, the mitzvah of the night, of the matzah. The middle one. Right? Halach ma'anya is reflective of the two pieces. The one piece which you're going to put for Afrikomen, the other one you're going to eat the matzah as the mitzvah. And then you say the alachilat matzah, and then you eat it. That's the beginning of the transformation of the meal, from a normal meal to a mitzvah meal on a whole different level. But the matzah that you eat is not just bread. It's a mitzvah in and of itself. It's the only, by the way, the only time that we have, I mean, the Korban Pesach as well, but it's all connected. The only time that we have a mitzvah in the eating of the thing itself, not a mitzvah to eat. So the mitzvah to eat Erev Yom Kippur. What do you have to eat? Whatever you want. Great excuse. Right? You eat whatever you want the whole day, and you're considered that you fast. Some people are very strict on that. Okay, they try and do it the whole year, so to make sure that lest they come forget to do it on the night before Yom Kippur. But the mitzvah, that's a mitzvah that just having the matzah in your mouth fulfills a mitzvah. It's like an unbelievable thing. You know, when you're chewing it and you swallow it, that's the mitzvah. That's a mitzvah derisa even. Then you've got the mitzvah of the maror. And the mitzvah of the maror is also the mitzvah of the food, ala chilat maror. Then you have the korech, also the korech. We do all these things with all this food, and you do it. Then what do? And this is where the real transformation comes of your normative, call it meal, into a whole different state. What do you do with your Shulchan Aruch? How do you start your Shulchan Aruch? I'm sure you all started the same. What's the first thing you said? I don't know your menu. The egg in salt water. No, I'm talking about your meal. There is nowhere that it says egg. You know, that's motzi, matzah, maror, korech, egg, Shulchan Aruch. Right? Immediately after your korech, you have the egg. Now that's a minhag. There's a minhag to eat an egg. Where does the minhag come from? So you also got it's a symbol of morning. What the hell's that got to do with the Seder? Sorry. What's that got to do with the Seder? So you'll say because Tisha B'Av, the first night of Pesach, always fall out the same time. I'm like, who cares? What's that got to do with the Seder? We try to uplift and move to the highest state of Simcha. So why do you start it? I'll tell you why. Because you have two foods, two tafshilin. The way the Mishnah describes it, it says that you bring before the person, the person who's running the Seder. Some say everybody should have their own Seder plate. All your own minhag, whatever you want to do. You bring them a chazeret, and you bring them a charoset, and you bring them the matzahs, and you bring what's called two tafshilin, shnei tafshilin, two cooked foods. What are those two cooked foods? The one is the zroa, chicken neck, whatever you want to call it. You can have whatever you want. Everybody's got their own thing. And you have a baita, an egg. What's that egg for? So now I've told you that you say the morning part. Well, I can't do the korban pesach because that's the zroa. The korban chagiga. And what's the korban chagiga done? What do you do with it? What are you supposed to do with it? Eat it. So the egg is representative of the eating, not just of anything. On a normal yontif, yes, you have a korban chagiga, but we don't represent it. We just eat. You know, meat and wine, we have a lekker time. But on the night of Seder, you take this egg, which is representative of the korban chagiga. It's a special korban that's brought on every one of the shalosh regalim. And that egg, you start your meal with, because that's showing that the meal that you're eating is the meal of chagiga. It's not stomach meal. Okay? All of a sudden, your meal is a different meal. And it's on that you have the unbelievable joy of the third cup of wine. You're benching on everything, on the mitzvah of matzah, through the mitzvah of maror, through the korech, which is Hillel sandwich, reminding us back to the Beit HaMikdash, then through the egg, which is the korban chagiga, then the normal meal, and then ultimately the afikomen, which is the representative of what? Of the korban pesach, that you should eat ala sova, which is very difficult. Ala sova means that you should actually have a little bit, be satisfied, but you should have a little bit of room left. Not easy in our meals. Imagine that. How would that be a coup? You made a small meal. Right? Fine. Probably the way it should be. Okay. But anyway, and then you have the afikomen, which is the korban pesach, and then you bench. And you bench with the taste of the afikomen in your mouth, because the afikomen is the korban pesach. So you bench with the taste of the korban pesach in your mouth, and what a thing to celebrate on the third cup with the third cup of wine. Okay, then you have the fourth cup of wine. And the fourth cup of wine comes when? After Hallel. And it's the same thing. You pour it before Hallel because it's part of the process of having it for Hallel, and that's how it is. Okay, that's the Seder in a nutshell. Why do you drink 4 cups of wine? So if we look in the Torah, we'll see that Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Moshe Rabbeinu 5, okay, expressions of Geula. Okay, 4 expressions of Geula. And he says to him, I wanted to spell out. But say to me, 4 expressions of Geula. There's one more, V'heveiti, which is the 5th cup. We don't drink that. Okay, so what is that? So it's clear, therefore, that according to that understanding, which is what Rashi brings from the Gemara, okay, that according to that, the the cups of wine correspond to this process of joy, of reaching different levels of geula, of redemption. Okay? That's according to one opinion. But I want to go through with you another opinion. I want to try and understand that. And I'm hoping that in going through that, you'll understand things a little bit of a different way. Okay, you ready for the journey? Okay. What I'd like you to go to, sorry, say again. Okay, so now, listen carefully. Listen carefully. If you go to page 219 in your Chumashim, if you've got it finished. So the story on page 219, which is towards the end of Parshat Vayeshev, if you don't have it, it's not, actually, yeah, bring on. Page 219, there aren't that many Chumashim. Maybe you can share. I don't know if you share the COVID, if you're allowed to share it. Okay, so in that, it's chapter 40 of Bereshit, chapter 40. In Parshat Vayeshev, yeah. Okay, it's chapter 40, verse. We're going to go to verse 5. Start at verse 5. Okay? If you haven't got it, don't stress. It's not important. I'm going to read it. So this is talking about the dreams of what we call the butler and the baker. You know? Thank God for Andrew Lloyd Webber, who gave us a way of calling them the Sarah Mashkim, the Sarah, the butler and the baker. Now listen carefully what it says. The two of them dreamt a dream, and each one had a dream on the same night, each one according to the interpretation of his dream. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison. In the prison, who else was in the prison? Yosef. Okay. So Yosef came to them in the morning, he saw them, and behold, they were aggrieved. I'm just reading it in English, but I'll go back to the Hebrew in the important part. And he asked Pharaoh's courtiers who were with him in the ward of his master's house, saying, why do you appear downcast? And they said to him, we dreamed a dream, but there's no interpreter for it. So Yosef said to them, do not interpret interpretations belong to God. Relate it to me if you please. Then the chamberlain of the cupbearer recounted his dream to Yosef, and he said to him, now I have to read this in Hebrew, and you'll see why I have to read it in Hebrew. And he said to him the following. In my dream, there was a vine in front of me. And he described what was how it worked, and I'm not going into that now. Go to the next passage. Then he says, because Paro biyadi, and the cup of Paro was in my hand. And I took the grapes, and I squeezed them into the cup of Paro. And I gave the cloth into the palm of Paro. Okay? Yosef said to him, this is the interpretation. He says that the three bundle of grapes are 3 days. In 3 days, Paro is going to take your head, you're going to put it back where it belongs. And you will give the kos Paro into Paro's hands, as was done right at the beginning, and everything will go okay. Okay. Says the Yerushalmi, as far as I remember. It is from these psukim that we learn 4 cups of wine. Where? Ladies, look at those psukim again. Count and tell me how many times it says the word kos. Kos. It says it 4 times. Okay? So it says the word kos 4 times. So because it says the word kos 4 times, we learn 4 cups of wine on Pesach. Isn't that amazing? Well, it is amazing, except what on earth has this got to do with Pesach? Okay? That's what we've got to look at. We've got to try and understand what Yosef's jail friends, okay, an interpretation of their dreams has to do with Pesach. Okay? Pesach is all about Geula, redemption. Okay? What precipitated redemption? You see, so the Torah says that when Bnei Yisrael in Mitzrayim, on that day apparently that Paro died by Yitzhak, they all cried out as one. There's a singular cry of some sort. that Bnei Israel cry out. They're all in the same position of slavery, let's call it. Okay? There's something about the coming togetherness of Bnei Israel, okay, that demands something happen to them besides just being slaves. You got it? Okay. Once we start with that, then we need to understand who takes them out. Who takes them out? It's obviously Hashem, but he takes them out through a servant called Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes? We all know the story of Moshe, right? Everyone knows it. Don't go into that. Just hold your finger on it. You don't travel with it. Just listen to me. Okay. So what happens is Moshe Rabbeinu is born. And we know the whole story. And it's amazing. It's incredible. And he's he's brought up in the way he's brought up in the palace. And then it said, okay, during those times, Moshe grew up. He went out to his brothers. Vayar b'sivlotam. He saw their suffering. Vayar, and he saw something else. Ish mitri makei ish ivri me'echad. He saw an Egyptian clapping another Jew. Okay, and what does he do? He kills him. We know that. Okay, then the next day, what happens is he goes out again. Listen carefully to these words. And behold, there are two Jews fighting. What's the difference between the experience that Moshe Rabbeinu has with the Egyptian and his brothers, and the experience that he has with these two Jews? Yeah, but I get that. But what are the words used? It says Vayar b'sivlotam and Vayar ish mitri makei ish ivri. Vayar, he saw it. But when it says that he saw these two, Datan and Abiram, busy fighting with each other, right? It doesn't say Vayar. It says Vihine. Okay? There's something about the Vayar. Okay? Now, we take a little bit more, then we know what happens. Then he goes and he experiences this burning bush story. Torah says, and Moshe was the Re'etzon, and he was going around, running around in the desert. He comes to Korev, and an angel of Hashem appears to him. In what? In this fire, in the snare, fire in the bush. Okay? The angel appears to him in the fire in the bush. But look what the Torah says. Vayar, and he saw. He saw something. He saw something. The angel appears, the fire in the bush. But Moshe Rabbeinu yars. I don't know what other word is. He looks carefully. He sees that there's something strange. So this word Vayar is a theme that goes through. It's what starts out Moshe's journey as the Goel of the Jewish people. He goes out by Yar b'sivlotam. He sees the suffering of his children, of his brothers. Then he sees the Egyptian hitting the Jew. Then he goes, when he's at the burning bush, Vayar, he sees the snare. The Vayar. Why is it that Vayar a constant refrain in this process of Geula? Why do you see and perceive? Because you care. Okay. Moshe Rabbeinu's Vayar is not just see. Anyone can see people working hard, but he doesn't. He sees beyond that. He sees the pain on their faces. He sees when when you can see when there's injustice. When he sees the Jew, the Egyptian hitting the Jew, he notices there's something wrong with it. It's just not correct. Why? Because there's nothing else going on in that place. The way the Gemara defines that story is that the Torah speaks about the son of the Egyptian. He's the one who was some say the one who was collecting the sticks, the one who blasphemed God. It's different exactly who he was. Who is that? There was one experience that one of all the thousands and thousands of every woman had with an Egyptian. Man, that was this. Because why? Because she was a very beautiful woman, and the Egyptian taskmaster had his eye on her. And what he did is he kicked the husband out, and he went and he raped her. And the husband saw, and the husband said to him, "Why? How could you do such a thing? I'd want him to be a slave, but we're not. That's not where we're at." So he was whipping him for that. That's the story. That's the narrative behind. Moshe Rabbeinu sees the injustice. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu sees something strange. He sees that the bush is burning when it shouldn't be, but it's not really burning. Okay, which is a very strange thing. Did we speak about Barad? The hail. Okay, just by the way, I'm just going to flow. I wasn't meaning, but I'm going to tell you this quickly. If you look at the hail is what? The hail, we know, because the way it's fire, but more than that, it's fire in water. Okay, how do you have fire in water? So that's the miracle, right? It's much bigger than that, because fire needs something to burn. It's fuel. The miracle of this is that the bush didn't burn, so how did the fire burn? Right? That's the miracle. It's the same miracle, by the way. What's happening in the Barad, what happens in the bush, is the same miracle of fire burning without fuel. You can think about that and make a brush. Okay? Just think about that. It's a very important thing. Because for Moshe, it wasn't strange. No one's seen anything like that before. For Moshe, it's like, that's what the experiences with God. That Hashem runs the world in a way which is completely supernatural. That's why Barad is such a powerful thing. But I can leave that for the moment. We got it. So we've got Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayar. Okay? Where did Moshe Rabbeinu learn that from? Moshe Rabbeinu has to, we have this concept in Chazal called Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim. The things that happen to our fathers are a sign for us that we have to learn the lessons from our forefathers. We do that as a general rule, we learn from our parents, okay? But it's a precedent that gets set in Chazal. Okay? You want to see something? I think it's amazing. Because I'm trying to connect Yosef, okay, to Mitzrayim. Because Mitzrayim, to Moshe, or somehow, because Mitzrayim, Geula begins in the Vayar. You happy with that? Now I'm going to show you something. Yosef comes, look at this. Who are these people? These are the chief chamberlain and the chief baker of Paro's court. Okay? What does Yosef care about them? What does Yosef have to do with him? Nothing. We know that he was like in charge of the jail. So what does it mean? He had to bring them food and do stuff. So he gives them food. You see all the movies. Here's your food. Why should he care? Look what it says. Torah says the following. They have this dream. Yosef comes to them in the morning. And guess what the next word is? He sees them. He sees them. The only reason that Yosef asked them what was wrong is because he vayar them. He saw that there was something wrong. He cared. The Ula comes from care. Because Yosef cared about them, right? He tells the dream, and he tells the interpretation. Well, they tell him their dream. He tells the interpretation. What happens? The Sarah Mashkim goes back into Paro's court, and 2 years later, what does he do? He pulls Yosef out of the jail. When he pulls Yosef out of the jail, Yosef then becomes the hero. When Yosef becomes the hero, what happens? He brings his father down to Mitzrayim. This whole process begins on that one word. When Yosef Bayar, he sees the faces of the Sarah Mashkim and the Sarah Ophim, and he cares. And that's where Geula begins, when we care. When we care for one another, when we care for each other. That's where redemption will begin. I think that's why we drink that. That's why when Shalom says we drink those 4 cups. Those 4 cups are not just about simcha, it's about care. And that's why perhaps we can say what the Rambam says, which I've said many times before, the Rambam says that the real joy is not me having everybody around my Seder table. The real joy is making sure that those who can't have people around their Seder table, right, have something for themselves. The Rambam says the joy, if you having sitting around having joy and just having a nice meal, that's what you call simcha kresav. It's just gluttony. But if you've given somebody else the capacity, the ability to have a Seder, then that's real joy. Why? By Yar, because you saw that there's someone else has got an issue that you need to deal with. And that's really, I think, what this is going on. Those 4 cups of wine, there's a lot, we'll finish with a great story. You all know the story, I'm sure. The Beis Halevi is approached by this poor man, and he's asked him a question. The poor man says to the Beis Halevi, is it okay to have wine for the 4 cups of wine? Great question, right? Wine. I'm sorry, like the milk. Sorry, milk for the 4 cups of wine. Sorry, milk for the 4 cups of wine. A great question, right? Because why? Because we know that if you don't have the wine, you can make it on what's called Hamad Medina, so the drink of the land. And the question is milk considered to be that, right? So the Beis Halevi opens up his drawer and he gives him 500 rubles, an enormous amount of money. And as he does that, as fate would have it, his wife walks in, okay? And she says to him, he asked you if he can have milk. Why are you giving him so much money? He says, don't understand. Why is he asking for milk? Because when do you have your 4 cups? Go back. The beginning for Kiddush. Can you have milk for Kiddush? No problem. Can you have milk for the 2nd cup of wine? No problem. Can you have milk after benching? No problem. Unless you had a fleishik meal. Why is he asking for milk? That means he doesn't even have meat for his meal. So why does he give him 500 rubles so that he can have meat for his meal? By Yar Basiv Lotam. We can look at those things. So I thought I'll share that with you. A nice idea for the Seder is Rat Hashem. We'll have one more next week.